It is my privilege to welcome Jonathan Hyde from Della as our guest speaker today. And Della was number 49 on the map that was shown on the video, right there in the center of the United States. Della is a national mission, and we have around 100 United Methodist national missions. And thank you. Oh, he's got one.
Yep.
All right.
I'm going to start today with the scripture, and I have a very short video, and then I want to tell you a couple stories. The scripture today is from Matthew 22, 34 to 40. When the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang all the law and all the prophets."
In 1897, Methodist women from Melrose Church in Northeast Kansas City recognized a need in their community. Older children from low-income families were required to stay home from school to care for younger siblings, enabling their parents to work. Many were Italian immigrants. Institutional church was open during weekdays to care for younger children so that older siblings could go back to school and get an education. Childcare for the working poor. After-school childcare needs were met at the church through tutoring, teaching children to read, and recreational activities. Young girls were taught to sew and cook, and boys learned other work skills. These supportive services took the stress off of families who were dedicated to finding their own way in their new homeland. In the 1940s, the organization adopted the name of the longtime volunteer and philanthropic supporter Della Lamb, the wife of the Kansas City, Missouri Police Commissioner Fred Lamb. Today, the organization reaches thousands of low-income families with a variety of services that Della Lamb herself might never have imagined.
Well, Della Lamb is a non-for-profit social service agency that has been in business since 1897. Initially, the service that Della was providing was limited to childcare.
Della Lamb Community Services is a large, comprehensive United Methodist sponsored, United Way funded organization. We serve almost 2,000 low-income families every day out of 5 inner-city sites.
The mission of the entire organization is to help people any way that we can.
We were at a position in our life where we were about to get evicted. We were under. And Miss Judy called me into her office, and she talked with me. She got some information from me. This woman didn't even know me. I didn't know her. And then next thing I know, she came out. She paid off money. She paid off rent. She paid off bills. And plus, she went and got us into another home.
The reason I come here every day is to drive, to make a difference in the kids' lives. You know, it's a big part of what I do now. It's just my makeup as a person. I don't know no other way to be. That's all I know, is to try to make a difference or finding ways to change their lives in some aspect.
Contributions are important to Della Lamb because they help pick up the missing pieces that other funders don't always cover. For example, the cost of utility bills in our 6 buildings, to be able to have heat on in those buildings, to have insurance, to have some of those essentials on the back end that we need to have in order to keep our doors open to have families come in.
Funding for Della Lamb includes everything that the students might need, from backpacks to paper to pens to pencils to textbooks, their meals, everything that is required by the school, Della Lamb provides.
We spend about 8 or 9% only for administrative. Everything, every other dollar goes towards the client services.
You know, I was at a grocery store not too long ago, and there was a kid. He was 25 years old. He's about 6'6" now, so I didn't really recognize him. And he said, "Hey, aren't you Coach Tony?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, man, you know, you talked to me when I was 15 and changed my whole life. I just wanted to let you know that. And so when you talk about the drive and what makes you get up each day, that's what I'm talking about.
Della Lamb means to the families a safe place. I've had many families actually come up and say that they want us to expand to the high school level because they know that their children are going to be safe here, they know that their children are going to be educated here, and they don't know what is on the outside of Della Lamb.
I mean, I can't tell enough people how Della have blessed me and helped me and my family. And so maybe this can get out to let a lot of people that don't know about Della think we're just a school. Let them know we go deeper than that. We're way farther than that.
I feel really blessed to be a part of this organization's history, to see the numbers of families who are served each day and the way in which they're served, the loving support from people of all races, all beliefs, all cultures, coming together just out of love for humanity. I feel so pleased to be a part of that mission.
So please open your pockets or your books and donate and stop by and see what we do.
Thank you for inviting me today. It's always a pleasure to go out and talk about Della Lamb and the things that we're doing with the support of many of the Methodist churches in the area and the region. I'm a kid from New Jersey. I came to Kansas 50 years ago. Went to Kansas State University and I was going to be an architect. I was 17 years old. What did I know? 5 years later, I'm a journalist all of a sudden. So I had a small little radio life in small towns in Kansas and felt compelled to get to something a little bit larger. So I moved to Kansas City 41 years ago. I was hired as the first PR director at Avila College. And the next year, Sister Olive Louise, the president, sat me down and said, I want you to be my development director. I want you to be the fundraiser. So when the sister says you're going to raise money, that's what you do for the rest of your life. So I find myself at the end of a long career, and most importantly, 7.5 years ago, Judy hired me at Della Lamb. It's an absolute pleasure to work in an organization like this as I end my career. I keep trying to slow down and she won't let me, but I know why, because the work is important, and if you're at Della, you're passionate about the mission. A few years ago, I started talking about Della's services in terms of refugees for a couple reasons. One is it's timely. It's a big issue, as we all know. The other thing is they use most of our services. We have 5 core services, and a lot of people in poverty might use 1 or 2, but they tend to need them all. I want to start quickly and talk about, or remind you about what a refugee is. A refugee does not stand up and profess to be a refugee. A refugee is someone who has been driven from their homeland because of persecution, politically, governmentally, race, religion, social group, ideology, beliefs. For some reason, they have felt compelled to leave their home. To be a refugee, you must have left your homeland. You must go to a second country. And when you go to that second country, the United Nations has people that hear your story. And they're the first ones that are going to hear why you feel you were prosecuted and make a determination. There's a few key points I want to make as I go through this. And the first is, it's a status that you have been given, or basically you've earned because of your life situation. So you become a refugee, and the United Nations has refugee camps that we've heard about, and they're in various places around the world. If you go to Dadaab, Kenya has 3 huge refugee camps. In Dadaab, each family has a tent. They're all lined up. Big tents for big families, often 2 and 3 generations. Little tents for little families. In the Dadaab camp, there are 400,000 people living in that camp alone. There's camps in Tanzania. There's camps in Western Africa. There's camps in Turkey. They're all over the world. 400,000 people living in a desert in tents. Unfortunately, there's some food. There's a little tiny bit of education, often informal. There's crime. There's probably persecution. But it's the life these people have. Today in the world, there are 24 million refugees. 24 million people are not living in their homeland, have no citizenship, not a lot of law and order. That's their plight. Judy and I were in Washington, D.C. a while back. We've started refugee resettlement 4.5 years ago. JVS, Jewish Vocational Service, has done it for 40 years, starting with the Vietnamese and the Russians way back as the Vietnam War was ending. We were in D.C. and we heard a woman talk, and she said something that stunned us. Between us, we have about 80 years of work in poverty programs and in not-for-profits. And we looked at each other just totally stunned. 24 million refugees in the world today. Only 1% will ever be resettled in a third country. So where they're living today is their plight of their life, unless they choose to leave. They're not prisoners, they can leave. The next best thing that happens to them is they're interviewed by the UN over 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And at some point, they may be deemed eligible for resettlement. 1%. And then they get in line to go to a country, Germany or Britain or New Zealand, Austria, Canada, or the United States. The second point I want to make is we have been told forever, not current administration, forever, that we don't know who these people are. That is the furthest thing from the truth. If you want to come to America, while you're living in the desert, with a file this thick for all the interviews you've done, told your story, your life is going to be looked at for the next 2 years. The vetting process takes 2 years. The Department of State, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, Homeland Security, the National Security Agency, the FBI, the CIA, and the Department of Defense are going to hear your story. They're going to look at everything you ever said. And if you made a mistake or you fibbed a little and they find out, you're basically off the list. There's no getting a lawyer and repairing the record. So they're going to talk to you all these times. So do you think we don't know who they are? We know everything about every refugee individual that comes to America. So one day this is where Della comes in, we get a piece of paper and it has some names and some dates of birthdays that may or may not be right because many of these people don't know when they were born. And it says something about if they've worked at all, most haven't, at least very productively, what languages they may or may not speak, medical. And based on 2 pieces of paper, we say we can take this family in Kansas City, we can meet their needs. So we wait 2, 3, 4, 5 more months, usually. And then one day we get an email. Today's Sunday. Tomorrow morning we might get an email and it said a week from Wednesday, a family of 5 or 7 or 8 is coming to Kansas City. And we go into action. We find a house or apartment. We pay the rent, utilities, all the deposits, furnished with all the furniture, furnished with all the household things you need. The government mandates that you have a dish strainer next to the sink in the kitchen. The list is long. And then we supply it with food. The most joyous day comes when we go to the airport to pick up families. Family gets off a plane. They're carrying their little sheath of papers, starting with the UN papers, and then the United States papers, and then the admission papers. Most have the clothes on their back, maybe a backpack. The lucky families might have a small suitcase for each person in the family. That's it. We take them home. The first thing we have to do before they go to bed at night is give them an orientation to their home. They may not know that hot water comes out of a tap. They may not know if you stick a knife in an electric socket, you're going to get shocked. They may not know what the smoke detector is. They may not know what a gas oven is. So we have to begin to teach them. Day 0, day 1. The next morning, they come to our ESL program, another Della program we've had for a long time. We teach people English, and it's full of cultural orientation as well. We start with things that are really, really advanced. Red means stop, green means go. This is a crosswalk. We teach them things like going back to their home, how to tell time. They never had to get on the 318 bus to go to work. But within 90 days, they're going to have a job. So we teach them to tell time. A lot of them are lunar. We teach them a lot of cultural things that we don't think about. The best example, the first 6 gentlemen we got about 4.5 years ago were from Eritrea, the other half of Ethiopia. After the Civil War, they ended up with 2 countries. And I went to the orientation the next morning. I'd been talking about it, I'd been writing grants about it, but I hadn't seen it. And Abdul Bakar, who runs our program, he said to one of the young men who spoke a little bit of English, only 1 out of 6 spoke any English. They said, excuse me, he said, what would happen if you were in the army and you went AWOL, you ran away? Response, they'd arrest my father and put him in jail. First lesson in America, they come from communal family setups. They believe in family units. In America, you are responsible for you. Foreign concept, they don't get it. We have to give them a certain amount of spending money while we're helping them pay their bills. The federal government gives us money to spend on their behalf. And I'll remind you, it's never enough. It runs out way before the 90 days. They need money the next Wednesday. Where'd all your money go? We sent it home. No. It's for you. You have to pay your rent. They don't know what rent is. They don't know what $600 is. So we have to do all these things for them. We have to do anything you can imagine. We have to teach them. Sometimes we're teaching them how to use the toilet, what trash is, how to mop a floor. Some of these people have never lived in a home. The landlords would like to have their houses kept clean. Not unreasonable, but it's our responsibility to teach them all of these things. So as we go along, the whole purpose is to get them self-sufficient. That's what Della's done for 121 years, provide vital support services to help people move forward in their life. The government gives us 90 days. Every refugee family is supposed to be self-sufficient in 90 days. And what do you need to be self-sufficient? You need a job. So while we're teaching them colors and days of the week and how to tell time, we're beginning a job process. We have a job placement program, help them with whatever skills they might have, a resume, interviewing, culturally. You send a refugee to a job interview, and the boss says, why do you want this job? We all know the right American answer. They want the job because they have to take care of their family. Well, some employers care about that more than others. So we have to teach them. Shake hands, look somebody in the eye, and smile. Those are often counter-indicated for the populations we work with. So we have to teach them to put on the fake smile. Come on, be an American. Shake their hand, look them in the eye. That's hard. That's hard for people who always are sort of deferring to authority. But it's what we have to teach them. By the way, we teach employers too. That's part of our job, is to make sure the community comes together. Mr. Al-Aboud was the first Syrian. If you remember, Obama asked that we bring in 10,000 Syrians when the Syrian situation exploded a few years ago. The first man to come to America was Mr. Al-Aboud, and he came to Della Lam. Some people didn't want him, too much trouble. He did need some surgery in his nasal cavities. A bomb had gone off, head high. He had shrapnel in his legs. He had a wife and 3 children when he fled. We didn't want him to tell his story the 5th day he was here because he was the first. We were on the front page of the New York Times and the Chicago Sun. We had 8 media outlets in our conference room because they demanded to know what he'd done in his first 5 days. He started telling about his trauma, the sniper fire, putting his family on the back of a truck. He ended up in a steel storage bin in Amman, Jordan, in a refugee camp, living in this bin for 3 years without windows. And then one day, he got to come to America. He's the most gracious man in the world. Every time I see him, he's got a hug for me. By the way, he won't shake your hand, but he'll give you a hug. They're genuine. That's why they don't go around with a big smile on their face, because they're genuine. If it's funny, they laugh. If it's not, Not a big deal. They're so real, and they're so productive. And we've had refugees cry because we couldn't get them a job 30 days after they'd been here. They want to work. No refugee ever told me they came here because there were good government benefits. So this company, U.S. Ferrethane, out on Horizon Parkway by the Argosy Casino, they took a chance. Abdul said what they do is they have huge robotic machines that punch out the plastic things in your car, in GMs and Fords. So anything that's plastic, the big thing, all they need is somebody to take it from the robot, look at it, make sure it's a good part, put the right label on it, put it in the right bin. They had 250 employees. They were hiring 15 to 20 people a week because their employees couldn't follow the rules. So Abdul said, I got a guy who speaks the language with a car, and in 2 weeks they hired 8 people, 2 carpools. Guess what? They show up on time at 2 p.m. for the shift. They're not impaired. They care about the job. They do a great job. And they're gracious to get a paycheck, $2 over minimum wage. And by the way, Ferrethane keeps them because they keep giving them raises very quickly. Today they have 50 refugees. A year after we started, they have 50 refugees out of 250 employees. And they always call and say, when I talk to Jamie, you got any more? Got any more? Yeah, we got more. No, not many are coming right now, so we don't have as many. But we'll get people to move up into those jobs if we can. One thing I forgot to tell you at the beginning, and really, it goes back to what this is sort of all about. A refugee's plight is based on hope. Abdul Bakar runs our program. And we had a gala dinner one night, and we asked him to do 3 minutes. He wouldn't tell us what he wanted to say. I like to script things. I'm a control freak when it comes to communications. But I'm doing this off the cuff, too, so... But he said, he had everybody in the room mesmerized. He said, the refugee's life, thinking about being in the camps, is based on hope. I hope the lion doesn't eat me. I hope I can find water today. I hope they don't kill me. And he paused, and in the next breath to this audience downtown in a big banquet hall, he said, the refugee's resettlement life is based on hope. I hope I can find a job. I hope my kids have a better life. I hope I can take care of my family. So we convert their dreams of terror to dreams of what we want for everybody in America. They come here and they work, they pay taxes. They're legal residents. We have immigrants, we have visa holders, we have refugees, we have asylees, and we have undocumented. Refugees we know more about, and they are legal residents of the United States. They get a few government benefits. People always ask that. Don't we give them all these benefits? Short term, a year or less. They get Medicaid for their family, health care, because they don't have enough money yet. They're still in poverty. They get Medicaid for 10 months. If you're born in America, you can get Medicaid for the rest of your life. Because we're charitable in that sense, usually. We're beginning to question some of those things now, unfortunately. So they bring diversity, they bring their religion, they bring language, they bring all kinds of things that make us the melting pot that we've been forever, in theory. The last story I have to share is Ibrahim. He lives in Eastern Independence. He came here in September a year ago, and he'd been here about 4 months, Christmas time, and Joe Robertson of the Star called me and said, I want to talk to a Muslim who's new in America. We do a huge Christmas program. 1,400 families get a turkey and groceries, and 2,300 kids get new underwear and socks and toys. It's huge, one of the biggest in the city. And he wanted a Muslim newly resettled to sort of look at that and say, how does that compare to his religion? Charity, almsgiving, helping others, being a good neighbor. And so we sent the reporter out to his house. We couldn't get Ibrahim in. Our driver was doing something else. So we sent Joe and his cameraman out, and he got there. And it's a community where they all know each other. They've all lived there a long time. They don't know each other well. They don't socialize a lot, but they're a community. And one of the guys, when Joe got there, made a big point about he had voted for President Trump. And this was after the election and before the inauguration. And Joe didn't respond to that. As a journalist, wouldn't you take it in? And huge story he wrote. I mean, he talked to everybody. At the end, he he asked this guy, he saw how the family had been taken care of. They're eating in each other's homes, they're sharing strange foods, they're helping the wife get to medical appointments, the kids were playing with the neighbor's dogs. Life was pretty good. But he'd only been here about 4 or 5 months. And he asked this gentleman who made a big deal about having voted for Trump, he said, what are you going to do when the president takes office if he wants to send Ibrahim and his family back to Syria? And the man said, he's not going anywhere. He's my neighbor. That's what neighbors do. Neighbors take care, they advocate for, they take time to learn about each other. Whether you have big kids or little kids or no kids at all, neighbors can get along, no matter what church you go to, no matter what your background is. And I think if we all just learn to learn who these people are, just one family. So love thy neighbor like yourself. Refugees are our neighbors. They may not live next door. They may not live in the next town. They may not even live in the next state. But they're our neighbors. There's distance between us. But we're all neighbors. We're all here. What is love? Love thy neighbor. Corinthians tells us that love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. Love rejoices in the truth. It bears all things. It believes all things. It hopes all things. It endures all things. Love never ends. That's what we hope for our neighbors, for all of our neighbors. And Della Lamb started taking care of some little kids so big kids could get educated. That's how we get out of poverty. We educate ourselves. And so today, the word refugee, I hope, means more to you now than it did 10 or 15 minutes ago. They're people who have had trauma in their life. They have suffered. They didn't even know what was here. But they wanted to be here because they sensed that America would be a good place to raise their kids. Safe, opportunity, those words we've used in our country for over 200 plus years, 250 years. So thank you for your time. I appreciate the opportunity to sort of tell you a little bit about Della and the things that we do. And we help everybody in poverty in this region, but we're really particularly happy these days to help refugees because they're the most wonderful, grateful, thankful people that I've ever met. It's really wonderful. Thanks for this opportunity.